Imagine a keylogger, one that takes screenshots of your desktop every few seconds. It will scrape those screenshots for text and stores everything into one big database. This tool, which some might refer to as an info stealer, is not built by a hacker, but by Microsoft. Its feature is called Windows Recall and is recently launched. In today's episode, we dive deep into Windows Recall and its implications. So, let's get on to it.
Welcome to Threat Talks. Let's delve deep into the dynamic world of cybersecurity.
So with me today is Jeroen Scheerder. Jeroen, welcome.
Thanks for having me.
My name is Maas, Field CTO at Ontoit. And for today, we dive deep into Windows Recall. So before we dive deep into everything that goes along with it, what exactly is Windows Recall?
Yes. In the industry, such a tool is called an info stealer. Mm-hmm. And the way it does steal information is take very frequent screenshots every few seconds and has these screenshots analyzed, so it recognizes objects on them, graphics.
Yeah, so
and
cats
it just,
or dogs.
Yes. Exactly. Buildings, locations, recognizable things using neural processing, and it just OCRs the text in the screenshots. This descriptive data of the screenshot made, is entered into a database, timestamped and with all the recognized objects, and this database can be searched. So you can ask things like, I was looking for pictures of London Bridge and I found a really nice one in which a balloon was floating over it. You probably could find the picture of the balloon floating over London Bridge. Mm-hmm. You stumbled upon last Monday, for example.
Okay.
That is the typical application.
Mm-hmm. Okay, and so Windows Recall, I know there was a lot of backlash already last year. I thought around May or June when Microsoft announces this feature. There was a lot of pushback from the security community, saying, there are a lot of security and privacy concerns that go along with this feature. Can you elaborate a bit on those?
Yes, let's simplify things. Privacy is a security concern. So there are just security concerns. And security is about protecting the things people do that are not necessarily public. And everything someone does is, in principle, confidential unless explicitly published. And this tool has the power of exposing a lot of sensitive data in such a way that any bypasser can easily steal it just by grabbing that database. So that's you would call it it's a high value target. This database for anyone wanting to collect that data, and usually malware authors need to jump through many burning hoops to get to that data. But it's all done for them. It's just there. And the exploitation in the earlier incarnations of the recall feature, it was very easy. There was a 2-line PowerShell script that
to get all the data from that database.
To extract and export all the data from that database. For a user, another user without administrative access and so on. So there's basically a full exploit.
The feature was there, but there were no controls in place to protect the data, make sure it stays on that machine. Maybe encryption, was that in place?
No. So you really could see that this had not really been thought through at that
they really
point.
Went for the feature and not for the security.
So in the subsequent iterations, some security features they try to bolt on, which is a different thing from building them in the first place. Yeah. So in the internal architecture of the recall process, the processes were subdivided and isolated in different spaces with a single sort of container doing the SQLite operations, but this process still runs in user space, and its memory, of course, is accessible to the user running the system. So yes, the database is encrypted, but the process that does the encryption and the decryption, its memory is readable for the user.
Has access to the system and is able to read the memory, he can extract the encryption key,
Yes,
and then simply
it hasn't
extract
yet
the
been
database.
done, but this attack has been conceived, and people are working on this, and they will most likely succeed.
Okay, and at the current state, will this feature be automatically enabled when you update to Windows 11?
It used to in its previous iterations. Now it's being finally rolled out, and with all the pushback this has gotten, it's become an opt-in feature for now.
Yeah.
Of course, the vendor has a way of introducing features, and they're not on by default, and along comes a Windows update, and suddenly they're on. So there, I would say there are limited guardrails in that area. Things you do not opt in now might be enabled at a later date. Similarly, for now, it requires a sort of beefy hardware system with neural processing units to do the image recognition. It's using analytical AI.
Okay, and that means also, because you need that hardware, that currently everything is running on the system itself.
Yes, that's its current design, but that's, of course, is a soft limitation. You can easily imagine the next generation, which is even more powerful, that enables this feature.
Or they want to enable it for desktops that don't have that
for
NPU.
systems that are cheaper.
Yeah.
Yes, and that of course is a marketing push, and the threat is real. It might be rolled into systems, and the problem will become bigger then, of course, because once you start sharing frequent screenshots with an external party, then they are vulnerable on the systems of the third party and also in transit. And even the fact that screenshots are being shared, of course, is interesting information.
Yeah, the screenshot itself also, it frightens me, because if you think of what you do all day on your computer, it's maybe not all work-related. Something is maybe really private. You have some sensitive information there. If that's all stored within one database, I won't like this feature.
Yeah, well, I am also of the none of your business school of thought. I do my work.
Okay.
And not the entire world needs to know how I do it.
No, I want to decide what I'm going to put.
Of course, that's just my personal sphere of.
Okay, and what can we say? So we already mentioned a few of those technical requirements. We mentioned the NPU. What kind of other requirements are there to run it?
It requires some storage. Okay. So mostly to enable it, you need at least 50 gigabytes of storage available. Normally, they would like, the vendor advises you to have 256 gigabytes available, and it will stop working once you go below 25 gigabytes of free space. Okay. And this is just for storing the screenshots, which it will retain for as long as storage holds out. And usually in the default advised configuration, that's about 3 months of screenshots.
Okay, that is still quite a long time. And then will it be longer in the database, or is that also 3 months of retention?
Not sure, because the cleanup process is undetailed for now. I suspect there will be a process that removes objects in the database that have no backing evidence by way of a screenshots, but there will be a delay.
Okay. And so we already mentioned there can be a lot of sensitive information in there that can cause a lot of trouble for a lot of groups. Who should worry about this feature? Because I can imagine there are a lot of different groups and people that can be affected by this feature if it is enabled.
Well, at many levels, of course. Who should worry? First and foremost, the user. I mean, it's their personal sphere that's being invaded. Then, of course, the next level is those responsible for the integrity of their organization's systems and data, because there is a great imminent risk of sensitive information becoming available to potentially nefarious third parties by way of the recall database getting exposed, which of course is also a step up. So if I get the credentials which are just typed on the screen in there, then the recall database is just a start for the attacker. Third, I would say intelligence communities.
Okay.
And of course, in the end, entire organizations are at risk because breaches cost money, and incidents cost money, and reputation loss is a real thing.
Yeah, I can also imagine that people who are sensitive to extortion, maybe journalists or political leaders.
Yeah, but basically that's everyone in
Yeah,
theory.
but not everyone has the same um, uh, impact if he's being extorted,
No,
or
no,
can
no.
have the same impact.
So this is a high value target on specific systems, and of course, some individuals are more interesting than others. And if you're a high value target, then it makes sense that you're more cautious
Yep.
with the things that you do.
Yeah, so more or less this counts for everyone. You should
Yes,
be.
because of course it is a total surveillance system in the end. So it's and we might draw an analogy to North Korea now building mobile phones, and of course North Korea being North Korea, they're building in a feature that they're let's surprise ourselves. It takes screenshots frequently and has them analyzed. I mean, this is basically the Windows recall design, but it's just the North Korean government, and we tend to think different about the North Korean government than we do about Microsoft. But it's the same mechanism and the same approach.
Yeah. This came out last week, I believe.
Yes.
The phone was smuggled out of North Korea, and then they figured out, hey, this is taking a screenshot. The difference here is, of course, that these screenshots are being sent at the moment to North Korea.
At the moment, yes.
So
it requires expensive hardware to do it on device. And a next possible development, of course, is that you make this feature available to people with cheaper PCs as well by lifting that analysis off the device and into some cloud. Yeah,
it's something we should look out for, and of course, watch carefully what will happen. Since this can have such a huge impact, what can we do about it if you don't want it or want to disable it?
What can we do about it? Well, there are things you can try.
Okay.
So, hopefully not opting in will work. At some point, the vendor might supply that it's useful for you anyway and enable it anyway. It's not uninstallable. At least that's not officially supported. So, and it might also be not possible to disable it in the future. You can for now, and even if it's enabled, there are ways in which it's turned off. So that's one venue. Hacks, of course, include stuff like making sure there's insufficient disk space for the process to run. I would say that's a slippery slope, and for now it's limited to a specific Windows 11 version. There exist other Windows 11 versions that are still supported, so you might want to hold off.
Yeah, as long as possible.
Exactly, and if you take this seriously, you might also plan for the contingency that next Windows version is not acceptable to you anymore, and rebuild your processes using something different.
Yeah.
After all, it's just a client operating system, and they're all equivalent.
Yeah. It's maybe not that easy to switch for everyone, but it's certainly a solution.
I mean, it's on the table, of course, and that's just a matter of vision. So you make choices, and this is one of the potential choices, even though it's not the evident path forward for most organizations.
Another current mitigation is, of course, at the moment at least, don't buy hardware with the NPU inside.
Yes.
I believe it's called Copilot Plus PCs, if I'm not mistaken.
Copilot Plus PCs, and there is a short list of NPU cards that allow this, aside from the branded Copilot Plus things.
Okay. And if we look at the real world scenario, so we already discussed North Korea that used this, of course, to let's say spy on their users. What are other real world scenarios or implications that might already happen or will happen in the future with this feature?
I'll give you an example, and it's an example from practice, and I'll make sure not to make that relocatable to the actual organization. But there was a secondary school, and the administrators of that school would very much like to know what their students had been doing. So they applauded this feature, wanted to enable it, and access these recall databases just to check what students were doing. I would say that's invasive, and it's sort of it's against my nature to feel good about things that way. But I see the driver there. I understand why, from their frame of reference, this would be a thing they want, to exert that level of control over their users.
Okay. So we're now more or less on why this feature is useful. We already mentioned that you can look back in time. Hey, when did I saw that picture of, I believe you had the London Bridge.
I had the balloon of London Bridge,
yeah.
but it can also be a cat jumping, a canary, or something, whatever.
What other, and then we have the spying as a use case. Well, can be used as such a use case.
Surveillance is the
surveillance
use case.
Indeed, yeah. What do you think, for example, for forensics? So let's say we had a breach. Could it be useful for forensic?
Maybe. It's also a trail of actions leading up to an incident. So it's one thing that you might want to investigate if you're a forensics auditor and you have an intact system post-incident. Then again, my suspicion would be that if there is a breach and someone is trying to mask their activities, then there probably won't be a recall database left.
Okay, and then
so if it's there, it might be. I do not know how you can check whether or not it's intact, whether it's not been tampered
it's also
with.
Too early to call because features just
right.
Around.
So there are potential applications there, but also pitfalls.
Yeah, I also saw that some applications took preventive measures like Signal.
Yes. This is also this is a bit strange, but let's go on that tangent. There is a mechanism of excluding applications from getting their content in recall. That mechanism is on and off in the current version. Reports about its usage are that you exclude one application and another application suddenly isn't captured anymore either. Or you try to exclude an application that just doesn't work. The feature is also built to prevent stuff like credit card numbers and CVEs and so to be captured, and that just really doesn't work.
Yeah, I can also imagine that's really hard. For example, our social security numbers here in the Netherlands are completely different.
Yes, but this doesn't even work for American social security numbers. Okay. So, and credit card numbers are a relatively simple case. They're fixed digits and have a checksum, and so I don't know, but that doesn't really work all that well. Might be fixed. You can always assume about things that don't really work well, but maybe they're just hard.
Yeah, the trick here was, if I understand correctly, to mark it as DRM material.
Yes, but there's of course the push from the people that sit on their content. Let's just call them Disney, and they have this delivery channel in which they want to guarantee confidential delivery to the end user, and they're using APIs to put things on the screen, and they are and content displayed on the screen that way is excluded from recall collection. So if you're playing a Disney movie on a Windows system using a built-in DVD player, I know we're going back in time now, but that would not show up in the recall. But also Signal, for example, has taken the approach that Signal has vanishing messages, right? So they're supposed to be time limited, but they appeared in recall screenshots anyway and had an infinite lifetime for that reason, which is a problem from the viewpoint of the Signal Foundation. So Signal retooled their Windows Signal client to use the DRM APIs to display their stuff, which means it's not collected anymore.
Yeah, but it also has the implication if I take a screenshot myself, it will not show up.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And of course, if you're a total surveillance organization, this will lead you to ban Signal because you can't monitor it, which is of course why Signal exists. But there we have the this war between interests.
Okay. I think that's a nice bridge to the next, or maybe the last item, or the conclusion. Is this all worth the risk? So we have a few use cases. Is it worth the risk enabling it? Because it also comes with still quite a security risk.
Gonna have to say no. I think, like many other things, vendors build stuff in that allow remote control, and they have a useful use case, but they're also dangerous. we built cryptography. It's meant to protect data. And once you build in a backdoor, it's just not protected anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And this is similar. We try to make systems that prevent leakage of data. And this just puts a trove of interesting data up for grabs to attackers. And it's shouting to be abused.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that's a sensible way.
Okay, and what would your advice advice be to organizations? So this is Windows 11 is coming around because Windows 10 is end of life. So Windows 11 will be pushed. Currently, this feature will be opt-in, but we might not. We don't know for how long. What should organizations do to protect themselves?
Right. So I'm going to defer to Kevin Beaumont for a while, who has specific recommendations on when to shun recall in particular. And that's, of course, when sensitive data is involved. But he points out a few interesting special interest groups. You mentioned, for example, journalists that may be targets for intelligence organizations, but also minorities at risk. For example, Uyghurs, people in China, or the LGBTQ community in the United States. Politically exposed persons, of course, they are at risk. But also, for example, simple cases of domestic violence, in which within the personal sphere, one partner is terrorizing the other. And recall is a dangerous feature. So there are really circumstances in which you need to control it. How you should do it, of course, you cannot deinstall it. It just comes with Windows if you have the wrong version. Well, you can, of course, try to avoid Windows, but if you don't, then you will need to monitor the controls in existence that govern the enablement of a recall. So group policy exists, and individual settings exist. And you can monitor these closely just to see if they're not just getting changed after a Windows update. And of course, you need to check that if it says it's off, it's really off.
Okay. So that also means that security teams should really include recall in their threat assessments to make sure that the right policies are in place.
Yes, I think so. They should.
Okay. I think that brings us to an end here. So we have this new feature, Windows Recall. Whether it's worth the risk that comes with it is completely up to you. There are a lot of risks involved, as we just discussed, and not many countermeasures we can take at this moment. So keep an eye out for it. Make sure your security teams are up to date, know what's coming, so they can keep an eye out for it. With that, if you like what you saw, please like and subscribe, and I hope to see you next time.
Thank you for listening to Threat Talks, a podcast by Onto It Cybersecurity and AMS-IX. Did you like what you heard? Do you want to learn more? Follow Threat Talks to stay up to date on the topic of cybersecurity.